and welcome back. Today we're going to be covering conditions and Boolean values. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you of the announcement I made in the previous video, which if you haven't already, go check it out. And so remember to leave a comment on what you'd like to see in any future videos. Also hit that like button, subscribe, then hit the notification icon. And so without wasting any of your time, let's begin. So what are Boolean values? Well, these are a type which, unlike strings, floats or integers, which have almost an unlimited number of possible values, Booleans have only two possible values. So as I had mentioned in my video on variables, comments and strings, Boolean values can only be one of either two values. That's either true or false. And when writing these true or false, always remember T and F should always be in caps. Boolean values are very useful when it comes to using them in conditions and loops, which I'll explain further in the video. So firstly, we have what we call comparison operators. Now in Python we can compare two values together, be it integers or strings, where when we compare them we can evaluate them down to a single Boolean value that's either true or false. So the first operator I would like to show you is the equal to operator, which is indicated by the double equal sign. The double equal sign is used to compare, while a single is used to assign a value to a variable. So remember that. So we can compare two values, say print, and I say 1 plus 1 equal 2. So what will happen is that if I run this, the Python will print out true, because 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So this is the first operator value. So this prints out true if our argument is true. So as you can see here, we also have the not equal to operator. This is basically just the opposite. If our first statement here, 1 plus 1 is not equal to 2, it will print out true. But since it is, it prints out false. But if I indicate there 3, as you can see, it prints out true there. We also have the less than operator. So less than there, so 1 plus 1 is less than 3, which prints out true there. We also have greater than, and if we run that, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, that will print out false. We also have the less than or equal to, which is simply less than or equal to that. So you first of all start by putting in the less than sign, and then the equals followed by the equal sign. This will give us true, since 1 plus 1, which is 2, is less than or equal to 2. We also have the greater or equal to sign, so greater or equal to sign, which prints out true if our first argument here is greater than or equal to this one here, which as you can see, this will print out false because 2 is less than. These, as you can see, they print out Boolean values, and what we can do is that just like we have these comparison operators, we also have Boolean operators. What Boolean operators do is that they allow you to actually evaluate two Boolean values into one value. There are three Boolean operators, these being and, or, and not. If these sound familiar, they should, because these are the names of the three basic logic gates. And if they are not familiar to you, it's okay. If you guys want, I can do a video on logic gates. So these are So these are the three basic types of Boolean operators, and they work just as you might think. The AND operator will only print out true if both our arguments are true. So print, and then say true, sorry, true and true, and when I run that, yeah, as you can see, true and true, both of them are true. So true and true equals true. If I was to change this to false and run that code, what will happen is that it's false there. And if I change that to false, run true. What's going on? Yeah, if I run that, since it's false and false, our output is also false. Then we also have the OR operator. OR gives us a value of true if one of the values is true. So false and true, this would give us true, since there is at least one true in the statement. So as you can see, they are true. But if both are false, the answer is obviously false. Then we also have the NOT operator, and this is basically just used to invert. So if I go not true and then run that, as you can see, that's false. And if I go for false there, yeah, we go true. So that's it with some of the Boolean operators and the like. But you know what, this is kind of boring, so I'm actually going to show you what these are actually used for. Something can I put it, something that will actually benefit your programs, and these are called conditions. So conditions, condition functions, we have if, else, and then elif, and these are basically just used to like Boolean values. We can pass in a Boolean argument in these functions, and what will happen is they'll execute a specific block of code, depending if it's true. But if it's false, they can also execute a different block of code. So yeah, so say if say a simple program input, and then name is equal to input, what is your name? And so if name, what you can do, before going further, what you can do with the function is that you can just pass in a Boolean value there and then true. But what happens is that this will always be true, but you can also pass in arguments, as I've said. These are the conditions. So let's say you're trying to calculate something, and say if the answer gives you a specific value, you run a specific block of code. But if it gives you something else, you run a different block of code. And what blocks of code are, it's basically just lines that are indented, as I'll just demonstrate here. So if name equal was then we want to say print hi waza. Then what we can do is that if we do this, it run our code. Oh, and as you can see, this is a block of code indicated by indentation. When typing in Python, you should always make sure that you indent. And usually if you are using if functions here, and if you use the full colon, and always remember this syntax, it's always the if your condition and then a full colon at the end, and when you press enter, if you're using an editor like I'm using Visual Studio Code here, it will automatically indent for you. Or you can basically just use the tab button on your keyboard, which indents with 5 spaces. So what happens that when I run this code and if I enter my name, it will say hey Waza. But we also want to put what if it's a different input that's entered. That's why the else comes in. So when implementing the else is basically just a default. So if our condition is met, we do this. Else, if our condition is not met, we want to do something else. So you will just go else. There, you don't need to pass in any argument for the else since it's a default. Then print say just excuse me, am I doing? Oh yeah, sorry. So you're not Waza. And so if I run this code, okay, so wait, what? Something is wrong. Just give me a second. Run that again. Okay, so what is your name? I go Waza and then hi Waza. But as you see, if I run this again, and say something else, Bob, what happens? See, you're not Waza, and our program edits. So as you can see here, if we have an if function here, if we pass in our argument, it will only execute this block of code right here if our argument is true. Else it will execute our default. But say what if you have different conditions you want to meet. You can, this is where the elif function comes in handy. So elif, unlike the else function, actually allows you to pass an argument. So elif name equal and say Bob there. print nope. So what does this do? Well, similar to what I just started the elif function. So as you can see here, in the elif function I can actually pass in an extra argument, and so if I run this, Bob, as you can see there, this time don't exit, right? Say was I forgot to change the name here, but you can see what happens. So if our first condition isn't met, we can actually pass in an elif. We can actually use an elif function to process a different condition, and if none of those conditions are met, we can use the else function. Now, one thing you can do with if statements is that you can use as many as you want, depending on how many conditions you need. You can even put if statements inside if statements. So say if true, then again another statement, if name equal whatever. You can keep on adding those if statements in there, or you can even just go that you type in a piece of code there, another elif. You can use as many conditions as you want depending on what you want to do. You're not just limited to using 3 or 2. You can use them to process what you want. One more thing you can do is that you can also use the Boolean operators. So as you can see here, I was using the the name equal whatever here, whatever is string 120. But you can also use the Boolean operators. So let's say if let's say second name here. So surname should equal input, then what is your surname? So what we can do is that we can actually use the and operator, or operator, and not operator. So if I say if name equal was here, and surname equal my surname here, Banda, we can print out something. So print f, and let's see, hi so we can print out this. So if this condition is met, without an else, we can just print something like print nope here, and if I run that, what is your name was surname Banda, hi was a Banda. But if none of these conditions was met, which I'll show. So if say I entered my name was but surname I entered something else, says nope there. So I mean this condition, the full condition has not been met. We've met the first part, but the second part is not met, and the AND operator will see. So this is true, this is false, and what happens that with the AND operator to only put out true if both are true, but since one is false, the entire statement automatically becomes false. We can also use the OR operator here, and what happens that only one of these has to be true. So if I enter my name here was but I say just say mark there, what happens that it will still print out the name since at least one of the conditions is true, and you can keep on changing this. So name, or if this condition here, you put an or function here, you put a or statement here. Surname, you can also continuously block them together. You can also put another condition here, or anything else here, another or. You can keep doing that. There is no restriction, as long as it makes logical sense to you. You can do it. You can also use the not operator, similar to the way we've been using these. So that's it with the video on conditions. If you have any questions, I recommend you can leave them down in the comments, and I'll get back to you. I recommend you do some practice with what we've learned, because in the next video I'm actually going to start with loops, and once we go through the loops, we'll also make a simple game in the terminal. Nothing too complicated, it's just being okay. You see when the tutorial ends. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, you can leave a like and also share the video. Thanks for watching.